Hi and welcome back. Recently I've been talking about changing the gearbox, and I showed that I bought an RX-8 gearbox and an MX5 gearbox to replace the original 2000E. I've decided that the MX5 is the way to go because it's dimensionally, it looks very similar to 2000E. It's got pretty good ratio, say it's a 5-speed box and it's quite light. But what we need to do is make a Mazda gearbox work with a Ford engine. So first up, we need to make an adapter plate. I keep turning around, so I'm trying to pick up this prop. There's been quite a few videos on this by other people. I've been watching a few, and I want to try and do something different. And the reason I want to try and put a bit of my own take on it is because I want to see what the difference is. Now, I've never done this before, and I'm completely winging it from now. But I'm going to put a picture up now, and this is the front view of the Mazda box and the 2000E. And you can see, very similar size, not too dissimilar. Both got hydraulic clutches, although the Mazda clutch lever is on the opposite side to the Ford, which is good. It moves that away from the exhaust, which is a problem that I currently have. The other thing is the starter motor position. And this is the thing, I'm not entirely sure which way I'm going to go with it. Because where the clutch arm is on the Mazda box is where the starter motor is on the Ford box. And the Mazda box has moved the starter motor further up. So what I want to see is it possible to put the starter motor where the original is? Then I can keep the starter motor I have. I know it works. If it's in the right position, then great. But if not, can I move it round to roughly where the Mazda position is? So here we are. Now, when I was doing a bit of Googling, I found that some of the Ford dimensions were available. So because I've got access to CAD and also a large printer, I printed this to scale 1:1 for the Ford box. So this will line up to the block. So say I'm at the back of the block now. This will be where the flywheel is, pointed towards the back of the car. So I've also drilled a hole here. There we go, there. And that is for aligning a socket of the same size in both the Mazda box and the Ford box. And this is something I'll come on to in a second. And also, I've put, just about make it out, we've got vertical line and a horizontal line running through the middle, because my intention is to mark up where some of mark up where the holes are for the Mazda box, and see if I can use these lines to create a datum so I can draw this up and figure out a few things rather than making a single one-off plate. I mean, if that's the way it has to go, that's the way it goes. What I want to do is try and make something that is repeatable. So let's get on with it. All right, so socket is just wedged in with some electrical tape. It's not going anywhere. That will align once I've started putting some of the fasteners in. So it's currently marked up for these two, and these two. I need to know where this lies. Now I can draw around, when I've got this mounted, and I'll do this in a sec. I'll draw around to show the profile of the Ford bell house. But I need to put something on here, like a marking die that I've got. That will show me where these two sit. Well, actually, I can get from behind on that one. I'll check whether I can get a pen in there. If not, then I'll put something on that will sort of mark that, 'cause it's only paper, which I've then mounted on a board. Let's give that a try. Right, that's the Ford bit done. Didn't go too badly. Managed to get in. I think I can get that clear enough for the starter motor mounts. Yeah, decent run. So what I've got to remember is this is gearbox is coming towards you, and next up is the MX5 box. So I'll get that set up and get that one drawn around. Now, I probably shouldn't be doing this. There is a casting mark here which looks to be down the centre, and it goes all the way along. So I'm going to assume that's my central datum point. I'll get that lined up with the centre line here and get it clamped up so it won't move, and we'll go from there. So I've just done a lot of marking out and drilling. Went to turn my camera off and realised I've not actually turned it on. So as it turns out, I didn't film that, but I can show you what I've done. Right, starting in the middle here. That's the hole that's going to make everything line up, because what I want to do is align everything before I start cutting. This line here is the outside of the flywheel. That's the rough position of the starter motor centre going from the casting on the for the bell housing. And then what I've done here is taken some dimensions off that from here, managed to roughly work it out. What I then have done is mirrored it, and then when I was looking at it, because I managed to still have the centre, is that I have then let me think, what did I do? I got the compass out and did this outer line, so that is the centre line of the starter motor going all the way around, because I wondered whether, as I said before, whether we put it on the opposite side or if we put it at the top. The centre lines have been scored, centre popped roughly where the starter centre is, so I can do some work on that. And then I've drilled these out. Yeah, it's a little crude. I've missed one, so I've got to redraw that in a sec. But what I'm going to do next is fit this to the Ford side. So basically what I'm going to do is start welding some nuts on, which will end up being drill jigs once I've got everything aligned, because these are slightly bigger, drilled out slightly bigger anyway, so that we can align it, and then I can start looking at where we're going to put the starter motor. So once they're both aligned on the Ford box and the Mazda box, then I'll cut out the flywheel centre, which I'll probably end up having to do with an angle grinder because I don't have any other way of doing it. And then we shall have a look at where we're going to put the starter motor in relation to the flywheel. Hopefully have an idea from that where we can put the nuts in and stuff, so I can actually then hopefully try it. See, over here, stump block is waiting, crank's all oiled up, and yeah, so I reckon I'll have to take the sump off. Oh no, I shouldn't have to. Should be all right. Anyway, ignore me. So yeah, I'm just going to go get the first gearbox, which I'll do the Ford, and we'll go from there. think I've made some pretty good progress. So we started off with this, and that's given me the holes, spacing, where everything works, and I was pretty confident. Then I made this. As you can see, it's a little chewed up, it's a little bit beaten up, mainly because I got the starter motor thing wrong, ended up welding this in after I'd already cut part of it, so it's got a lot of, you can see, that is pretty shocking. But I got the starter motor correct, like I say. Didn't need that in the end. And I think moving on, spoken to a couple of companies, I'm waiting for some more information, etc. Basically, what it could be, or what I'm thinking of doing, is having it measured on a CMM, so that will plot where the holes are. You get a load of coordinates from it, and from that you can produce a CAD drawing. From a CAD drawing, you can then produce a proper laser cut or machine part, which is the intention. Whether I go down that route, I'm not entirely sure yet. At the minute, I'm still in like testing theory. So, with what I learned from that first sheet, I made a second one. This is a little neater. It's not as warped. It is warped, but it's not as warped. Mainly because a little bit of heat and then taking the center out has just pulled it in a few. It's sort of oil canned a bit, but that is just enough that I've got enough access for the rear oil seal plate and the core plug behind on the block and the starter motor. So when this goes on, granted I'm going to have to cut an outer shape, but that's at the minute I'm not doing that for the reason for CMM, because it needs a datum point. Now if I can keep these edges, it can measure all four and produce all that stuff. So that's kind of what I'm doing that. But that's also not important at the minute. Sorry, I digress. Let me think. Yeah, so if I put this on the block, then put the flywheel on like you would with the original plate, all this lines up. But I've managed to bolt the engine and gearbox together off this, and the starter motor, and everything cranks and everything does what it needs to do. And it looks fairly central. Like measuring the input shaft, which is about 15 mil, and the bush on the crank is 15 mil as well. So from what I've worked out, I'm within at 1.1 of a mil. 0.1 of a millimeter is pretty good, I think, so far. The flywheel is currently being re-drilled and tapped for the MX5 clutch. So I'm trying to catch up with where I'm at. So what I'm after next is a plate that will support the weight and be enough so that I can cut an outer shape as well. And also potentially work. So what I have here is a 6mm plate. I'm not intending on drilling and tapping, so I think I'm going to bolt through. The only thing I will have is countersunks for the top of the Mazda gearbox and coming towards us, so from engine to gearbox, and then from gearbox to engine going into the top of the block. They'll need to be countersunk. The Mazda ones I'll weld on, use those as dowels. Ford ones will just be bolted in. So what I'm going to do here is turn this into a similar plate to those two, but with a bit of outer shape. And what it will let me do is not rely on welded nuts and bolts to hold this thing together, and it will be enough to do that. I know it might not be the straightest, so I think once I've done this, I'll check it for level. I think it's slightly off, but not by much. So I might as well do what I need to. If it's that bad, I can take it to work. So I've got a hydraulic press. I can try and level it out a bit better where it's worse. So yeah, what I'll do in a second, I'll get the nicer sheet, clamp it to this on the bench, and then mark the centres And for that, I've made these. So I've made a set of these in M10 and M12, which is what I've used on the plate that I've made. And these screw in. You can see there's a hole in the centre. These aren't very... Where's my camera? Hold it in the right way. These aren't very deep. And the reason for that is... there it is. My centre punch. These will go into the centre of the... Sorry. These are going to the nuts. Centre's marked out. So if I put my centre punch in there and that is a very tight fit, I can only punch the centre. So I haven't got to worry about marking anything out and trying to figure out where the centre of the circle is. This will do it for me. Just something I quickly whipped up on a drawing, and really impressed with that. I might end up making more of those in different sizes, so for future work, because this has actually worked out much better than I expected it to. So enough waffle. I'm now going to mark this out and start cutting it. I probably won't film them marking out, mainly because it's marking out, you can't really see anything. But I will show you when I start cutting it, because cutting 6mm is going to be tricky. Right, I've got everything drilled out. I've tapped the forward side to M10, metric I know, probably controversial, but easy to get hold of fasteners. So the next bit I'll show you is cutting out the centre, and I'm a little bit cautious on this because this is 6mm, and I'm going to try and do it with a jigsaw, but more on that in a minute. So that's the shape I've come up with. I've tried to keep it as minimal as possible, so I haven't got the flywheel exposed on the engine side, just because it's going to get hit with a load of rubbish. So I'm trying to minimise that. If I have to go bigger, then I have to go bigger, and then put in a plate that will cover that. Now I did hole saw the starter motor, but that's not big enough. That's too big around here, so what I'm going to do, I've marked it out with some French chalk. You can see everything bolted up fine, which is I'm really happy about as well, so that means everything's lined up. As you can see, when I've cut this roughly, that goes uphill, it's not very straight, so I've marked out where this is, where I've cut things at the minute. What I'm going to do in a second is take this plate off, give it a tidy up, so get that line straight. I'm going to bring this area slightly further in, because I can always just finesse it once I've finished it. Here I'm pretty cool with, quite like the radius all the way around, pretty happy with that. And then I will figure out how we are going to then cut this. Let's go on with it. Right, that's the centre cut. I've cleaned it all up. It's cleaned up quite well, actually. I know it's not the best lines. They're not as straight as they could be, but at least it'll clear, he hopes. Starter motor is on. I've spent quite a bit of time finessing this, and I've got it pretty tight. So that's central anyway, which is good. Yeah, I wanted it to stay close. It's a little bit over there, but I'm not going to beat myself up, because what I can do when I cut the outside is just keep a little bit more material around there anyway for deflection. So next up is take this plate, put it on the engine, mount the gearbox on. I know I haven't got the flywheel at the minute, but it'll be fine. Excuse me. Have a look at how it all sits. Hopefully everything's central. And then it will be a case of taking this plate, drawing around the gearbox, making sure, seeing what I need to cut off that to make it all look pretty. Might cut that tab off at some point, just because it's not really doing anything, and why not? Where the starter motor is here, I think I'll lop this little bit of aluminium off here, bring this in slightly, and then make a finishing plate that I'll bolt to the gearbox here out of aluminium. I'll just fold some aluminium around, but that'll be a later job, I think. So yeah, time to get it all thrown together. It's been a few hours of cutting and filing and fitting and checking, but we have a plate, and it looks pretty good actually. It doesn't look as mashed as I thought it would. I think eventually I'll give it a sand and a paint to stop it from rusting, because it is steel. But I am happy with how it is. All that's left now is to focus on the clutch and possibly start the gearbox mount before I actually start throwing the thing in. But we're going to leave that here for this episode, because it's been quite a while. But I hope you've enjoyed it. It's the first time I've done this. Been a little bit daunting. So I'm pleasantly surprised with how we've got, actually. I think it's good. So if you've got any questions, please get in touch. And if you haven't already, please like, share and subscribe. And I'll see you soon. Thanks for watching.